The air inside the command bunker was heavy, laden with the static hum of distant machinery and the weight of what was about to be revealed. Commander Alex Greaves stood rigid, his gaze fixed on the central screen as the feed began to play. The footage, captured by a drone that had barely escaped detection, showed the alien Gorth Empire's cruelty in raw, unfiltered clarity. Human prisoners, emaciated and bound, were lined up in front of towering Gorth officers. One by one, they were executed with precise, indifferent efficiency. The faint sound of Greaves's knuckles cracking was the only noise in the room. "This is not just a war crime," Admiral Nathan Roy said, his voice low but seething with fury. "This is an act of extermination." Greaves nodded, his jaw clenched tight. The Gorth had crossed every conceivable line, and the images now burned into his mind would not let him rest. He turned to Royce, the older man's battle-hardened face etched with a mixture of outrage and determination. "They wanted to send us a message," Greaves said, his voice like a storm cloud. "Now, we send one back." Hours later, the United Earth Council convened in the subterranean chambers of Geneva Base. Representatives from every surviving nation sat in grim silence as the footage was replayed. The room was dimly lit, the holographic projections casting ghostly shadows across weary faces. Roy stepped forward to address the assembly, his military uniform a stark contrast to the suits and diplomatic attire of the council members. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice booming, "this is not a war we can avoid. The Gorth Empire has made it clear they see humanity as nothing more than a pest to be eradicated. We've tried diplomacy, restraint, and compromise. They respond with executions and genocide. If we fail to act now, we will be signing our own death warrant." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some council members nodded in agreement, while others exchanged anxious glances. The Gorth were an advanced species, their technology surpassing humanity's in many areas. A full-scale war would be costly, perhaps even suicidal. One of the representatives, a slender man with graying hair, rose to speak. "Admiral Royce, I respect your passion, but let's not pretend this isn't a gamble. Our forces are stretched thin as it is. How do you propose we take on an empire that spans half the galaxy?" Royce met the man's gaze, his expression unyielding, with resolve, with ingenuity, and with the understanding that this is no longer a choice but a necessity. The room fell silent. Greaves, who had remained seated thus far, finally stood. His presence was commanding, his words steady. "The Gorth think we're weak. They've underestimated us before, and that's their mistake. We don't need to match them ship for ship or weapon for weapon. We just need to fight like we've got nothing left to lose, because we don't." The council erupted into a cacophony of voices. Royce and Greaves exchanged a glance, knowing that their message had struck a chord. An hour later, the president of Earth, an eaglet woman whose fiery speeches had unified humanity before, addressed the planet. "My fellow humans," her voice rang out across every screen and communication channel. "The Gorth Empire has shown us their true face. They see us as insects to be crushed underfoot. But they forget one thing. When united, humanity is unstoppable. Today, we declare war, not for conquest, not for revenge, but for survival. For freedom." The declaration galvanized the planet. Across Earth and its colonies, soldiers donned their armor, engineers prepared the warships, and civilians volunteered in droves. Factories churned out weapons and supplies around the clock, and recruitment centers overflowed. The grim determination of a species pushed to the brink became a fire that burned across every corner of humanity. Amid the surge of preparation, Captain Marcus Drake stood out. A veteran of countless skirmishes, Drake was known for his unyielding courage and tactical brilliance. Leading a hand-picked squad of elite operatives, he was the tip of humanity's spear. He was called to a briefing with Greaves and Royce, where the stakes of the war were laid bare. "This is going to be unlike anything we've faced before," Greaves said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. You and your team will be at the forefront. Surgical strikes, sabotage, infiltration, missions that could turn the tide. Are you ready for that? Drake's reply was simple. Always. As the meeting ended, Greaves found himself lingering, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. Each red marker represented a Gorth-controlled system, a reminder of the enemy's dominance. Royce joined him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We've got a long road ahead," Royce said. "But I believe in us." Greaves didn't look away from the map. "So do I. And when we're done, the Gorth will regret ever underestimating us." The first chapter of humanity's defiance was written that day. With their backs against the wall, humanity did what it had always done. It prepared to fight. The echoes of the Council's decision and the President's speech reverberated through every battalion and starship. War was no longer a looming shadow. It was a blazing reality, and humanity was ready to meet it head-on. The Gorth outpost loomed on the horizon, its spiked towers casting jagged shadows over the rocky terrain of Rhythm 4. Captain Marcus Drake crouched behind a shattered boulder, his squad fanned out in perfect formation. Above them, the twin moons bathed the landscape in an eerie blue light. The hum of Gorth patrol drones echoed faintly in the still air. Drake's voice crackled softly over the comms. "Targets in sight. Beta team, hold the flank. Charlie team, prepare the charges. We go silent and fast." The mission was clear. Cripple the Gorth supply depot, fueling their fleet in this sector. Intelligence suggested the depot was lightly guarded, but Drake had been in this game long enough to know better. The Gorth never underestimated their enemies. They simply overpowered them. With a subtle hand gesture, Drake signaled his team to move. They advanced in synchronized precision, their armored boots barely whispering against the ground. The squad was a mix of veterans and fresh recruits, each man handpicked for their skill and nerve. Among them was Sergeant Elias Ward, a burly demolitions expert whose humor often masked his deadly efficiency. "Think they'll even know what hit him?" Ward whispered as he fell in line beside Drake. "They'll know," Drake replied coldly, "but it'll be too late." They reached the depot perimeter, a high-tech fence pulsating with a faint energy field. Private Cale Renner, the team's tech specialist, worked quickly to disable it, his hands a blur over the holographic interface. A soft beep confirmed success, and the squad slipped inside like shadows. The depot was vast, filled with towering fuel tanks and crates of alien weaponry. Gorth guards patrolled the area in pairs, their angular forms illuminated by the green glow of their energy rifles. Drake signaled for a halt, his sharp eyes scanning the layout. "Ward, place the charges on those tanks," he ordered. "Renner, you're on overwatch. The rest of you, take out the patrols quietly." The team moved like clockwork. Ward crouched low as he set the explosives, his face illuminated by the faint red glow of the timers. Renner climbed to a vantage point, his rifle trained on the guards below. Meanwhile, Drake and two others dispatched the patrols with silent precision, knives gleaming briefly in the moonlight before disappearing into their sheaths. The first explosion ripped through the night like thunder. A towering fireball consumed the depot's central tanks, sending debris raining down. Alarms blared as Gorth soldiers scrambled to respond, but Drake's team was already on the move. Plasma bolts streaked through the air as the squad fought their way to the extraction point. "Stay tight," Drake shouted, his rifle spitting bursts of fire. A Gorth soldier lunged at him, its claws flashing, but Drake sidestepped and brought the butt of his weapon down hard, dropping the alien. By the time they reached the evac zone, the depot was a smoldering ruin. The mission was a success, but Drake's satisfaction was short-lived. Reports of Gorth retaliation flooded the command channels before his team even touched down. Back at Earth Command, Commander Alex Greaves reviewed the incoming reports with a grim expression. Colony after colony had fallen to swift, merciless Gorth counterattacks. Civilian casualties were staggering, entire settlements reduced to ashes. They're hitting us where it hurts, Admiral Nathan Royce said, pacing the room. They know we can't protect every colony. Greaves leaned over the holographic map, his fingers tracing the red markers that signified lost territories. Then we make it hurt worse for them. What's the status of the EMP bombs? Royce straightened, his eyes glinting with a spark of hope. The prototypes are ready. If we can disable their shields, we level the playing field. The plan was ambitious, bordering on reckless. The EMP bombs could disrupt the Gortha's advanced shielding systems, making their fleet vulnerable to conventional weapons. But deploying the bombs required precision, and that meant sending in Drake's team once again. Drake's squad gathered in the war room, their faces hardened by the recent battles. Greaves stood before them, his tone firm. The Gor think they're untouchable because of their shields. We're about to prove them wrong. You'll be inserting behind enemy lines to deploy the EMP bombs at their forward command station. This is high risk, but it's our best shot. Ward smirked, hefting his gear. Sounds like another day at the office. Drake shot him a warning glance, but couldn't suppress a small grin. Let's focus on making it back alive, Sergeant. As the team prepared, Drake found himself alone for a moment, staring at a small photograph tucked inside his locker. It was his brother, a bright-eyed young soldier who had died in one of the first Gorth attacks. The memory hardened Drake's resolve. We do this, he murmured to himself. For all of them, the section ended with the squad boarding their transport, the engines roaring to life. Above them, the stars stretched endlessly, a reminder of the vast and hostile galaxy they were about to face. The spark of resistance had grown into a blazing fire, but the war was far from over. What awaited them on the Gorth-controlled world was uncertain. But one thing was clear. Humanity wasn't going down without a fight. The hangar buzzed with activity as Captain Marcus Drake's squad prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. The EMP bombs, packed into reinforced containers, sat ominously at the center of the loading bay. Engineers scurried to make last-minute adjustments, their faces pale with tension. Drake stood nearby, tightening his gloves, his gaze fixed on the crates. This mission would either cripple the Gorth fleet or spell doom for everyone involved. Commander Alex Greaves and Admiral Nathan Royce approached, their expressions as unyielding as stone. Greaves handed Drake a data tablet, its holographic display showing a three-dimensional layout of the Gorth command station. This is their forward base, Greaves explained. The EMP bombs need to be placed here and here. He pointed to two shield generators located deep within the station. Once the shields are down, our fleet will launch an all-out assault. But without you, none of this works. Drake studied the map, nodding. What's our window? 10 minutes max, Roy said. After that, the Gorth will figure out what's happening and counter. Make it count. Drake met their eyes, his voice steady. We'll get it done. As the squad boarded their transport, the gravity of the mission weighed heavily on them. Sergeant Elias Ward broke the silence with a characteristic quip. Well, boys, if this doesn't kill us, the paperwork might. Private Cale Renner chuckled nervously, but the tension remained palpable. Even Ward, usually the heart of levity, couldn't fully mask the seriousness of the task ahead. The Gorth command station loomed like a fortress carved from black stone, its walls pulsating with an eerie blue energy. The transport hovered silently above the surface, cloaked by experimental stealth technology. Renner worked quickly, hacking into the station's outer defenses. Got it, he whispered. We're in. The team descended into the labyrinthine corridors of the station, their footsteps muffled by the alien alloy beneath them. The atmosphere was stifling, a mix of oppressive heat and the faint hum of alien machinery. Drake signaled for a halt, his sharp eyes scanning the area. Ward, take Charlie team to the west generator. Renner and I will handle the east. Keep comms open but stay quiet. We're ghosts here. The squad split into two teams, moving with practiced efficiency. Drake and Renner navigated the twisting passageways, encountering sporadic resistance. Goroth guards patrolled in pairs, their angular forms blending with the station's sharp architecture. Drake dispatched one with a knife to the throat, while Renner used a silenced plasma pistol to take down the other. At the east generator, Renner began setting the EMP bomb. His hands moved swiftly, but his breathing betrayed his nerves. "How much longer?" Drake whispered, keeping watch. "Almost there," Renner replied, sweat dripping down his forehead. Before he could finish, the station's alarm blared, its shrill sound piercing the air. A patrol must have discovered Ward's team. "Move faster," Drake ordered. On the west side, chaos erupted. Ward's team was pinned down, Goroth soldiers advancing with ruthless precision. Ward barked orders, his voice cutting through the din of plasma fire. "Hold them off. I just need a few more seconds." Private Caleb Voss, the youngest member of the squad, stood his ground, firing round after round. A plasma bolt struck him in the chest, and he fell with a gasp. Ward gritted his teeth, setting the last charge as Goroth reinforcements closed in. "Bomb set," Ward shouted into the comms. "Drake, we're getting out now." But the enemy's numbers were overwhelming. Ward made a split-second decision, grabbing a grenade from his belt. "Get the others out," he told his second-in-command, a grim smile on his face. "I'll cover you." Before anyone could argue, he pulled the pin and charged forward, disappearing in a flash of light and sound. Drake and Renner heard the explosion over the comms, followed by static. Drake's face hardened, but he didn't pause. "Bomb set here, too," Renner said, his voice unsteady. "Good. Let's move." The two raced toward the extraction point, the station shaking as the EMP bombs began to destabilize its systems. Goroth soldiers pursued them, their guttural voices echoing through the corridors. Renner was struck in the leg, stumbling but continuing to fire back. "Go!" Renner shouted, gritting his teeth. Drake hauled him up, dragging him toward the exit as plasma bolts scorched the walls around them. The transport appeared just in time, its ramp lowering to reveal the surviving members of Ward's team. "Get in," barked the pilot, his voice urgent. Drake shoved Renner aboard, firing a final shot before leaping onto the ramp as the transport lifted off. Below them, the Goroth station erupted in a cascade of energy, the EMP bombs detonating in tandem. The team watched as the alien structure collapsed, its shields flickering out and leaving it vulnerable. Back on Earth Command, the fleet wasted no time. Greaves and Royce coordinated the assault, their ships descending upon the unshielded Goroth forces like a tidal wave. The battle raged for hours, but by the end, the Goroth fleet in the sector was annihilated. In the aftermath, Drake's squad gathered in the infirmary. The loss of Ward hung heavily over them, his absence a void that could never be filled. Greaves visited them personally, his voice somber. "Your actions saved countless lives today," he said. "Ward's sacrifice won't be forgotten." Drake nodded, his face unreadable. Inside, though, he burned with a fierce resolve. This war wasn't over, not by a long shot. And for every life the Goroth took, humanity would ensure they paid in kind. The flames of sacrifice had fueled humanity's retaliation, but Drake knew the hardest battles were still to come. The void of space was filled with tension as Earth's fleet assembled at the edge of the Goroth home system, a sprawling network of planets orbiting a dying red star. Captain Marcus Drake stood on the bridge of the Eaglet, a sleek battleship outfitted with Earth's most advanced weaponry. Through the massive viewport, he could see humanity's combined forces, a tapestry of ships ranging from massive carriers to nimble fighters, all poised for the final strike. Commander Alex Greaves' voice echoed over the fleet-wide comms, steady and unyielding. "Today, we fight for survival, for freedom. The Goroth think they've crushed us, that we're a fractured, desperate species. Let's show them what humanity can do when it's united." Drake's squad was stationed in the assault hangar, preparing for their role in the offensive. Though their numbers had been bolstered with new recruits, the absence of Sergeant Ward was a heavy weight. Private Cale Renner, his legs still bandaged from the previous mission, finished calibrating his rifle with a grim determination. Ward would have loved this, Renner said quietly, a rare somberness in his tone. Drake nodded, his voice firm. Then let's make sure we don't waste the chance he gave us. The plan was simple in theory but perilous in execution. The fleet would engage the Gortha's outer defenses, drawing their forces into open combat. Meanwhile, Drake's team would infiltrate the Gorth capital ship, a towering dreadnought known as Erythian Prime, and disable its central command node. Without it, the Gorth fleet would lose coordination, giving Earth the advantage. The battle erupted as Earth's fleet surged forward, unleashing waves of plasma fire and kinetic railgun blasts. The Gorth responded with brutal precision, their ships firing beams of energy that sliced through smaller Earth vessels. Explosions lit up the blackness, a grim tapestry of sacrifice and resolve. In the chaos, Drake's transport maneuvered toward Erythian Prime, weaving through the maelstrom of dogfights and debris. Renner manned the turret, firing at Gorth interceptors that swarmed around them like angry hornets. "Hold it steady," Renner shouted as he downed another attacker. "I'm trying, kid," the pilot snapped, veering sharply to avoid a collision. The transport docked on the dreadnought's hull with a deafening clang. Drake's squad disembarked swiftly, their boots magnetizing to the ship's surface. The team moved with precision, cutting through an airlock and entering the labyrinthine corridors of the Gorth vessel. Inside, the ship was a maze of alien architecture, its walls pulsating with a faint bioluminescent glow. Gorth soldiers swarmed to intercept them, but Drake's team fought with ferocity. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, and the sharp clang of metal echoed as blades clashed in close quarters. Drake led the charge, his movements a blend of efficiency and raw determination. Every step brought them closer to the command node, and deeper into the heart of danger. "Renner, status on that map?" Drake barked, firing at a Gorth soldier who lunged from the shadows. Renner pulled up a holographic display, his fingers flying across the interface. "We're 2 levels away, left at the next junction." The team pressed on, their numbers dwindling as the Gortha's defenses intensified. Private Logan Hale fell while covering their flank, his last act ensuring the squad could push forward. "Keep moving," Drake shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Finally, they reached the command node, a sprawling chamber dominated by a pulsating core of energy suspended in the center. The Gorth had fortified the area heavily, and the squad found themselves outnumbered. Drake took cover, his mind racing. The node was their objective, but the odds were grim. He activated his calm Greaves. "We've reached the target, but we're pinned down. I'm requesting backup." Greaves's voice crackled in response. "Negative. We can't spare any forces." "It's on you, Drake." Drake clenched his jaw. "Understood." Turning to his squad, he spoke quickly. "Renner, set the charges on the node. The rest of you, cover him. No one stops us." The team fought with everything they had. Their dwindling ammunition and energy reserves no match for their resolve. Renner reached the core, his hands shaking as he armed the explosives. "It's done," he shouted. "Fall back," Drake ordered, firing at an advancing Gorth officer. As the squad retreated, Renner stumbled, a plasma bolt grazing his side. Drake turned back, grabbing Renner and hauling him to his feet. "You're not dying here," Drake growled, dragging him toward the exit. The charges detonated as the team reached the extraction point. The shockwave rippled through the dreadnought, its systems failing spectacularly. Onboard lights flickered and died, and the Gortha's coordinated formations faltered as the command node collapsed. Earth's fleet seized the opportunity, pressing the advantage. One by one, the Gorth ships fell, their once mighty fleet reduced to debris. The tide of the war had turned. Back on the Eaglet, Drake and the remnants of his squad stood in silence as the wreckage of Erythian Prime drifted past. The cost of victory was etched into their faces, but so was a glimmer of hope. Greaves's voice came over the comms. The Gorth fleet is in full retreat. Earth is safe, for now. You did good, Drake. You all did. Drake exhaled, his shoulders sagging as the weight of the mission finally lifted. Turning to his squad, he spoke softly but firmly. We're not done yet. But today, we showed them what it means to fight for humanity. The stars beyond the viewport shimmered, a silent testament to the sacrifices made. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, victory felt possible. Humanity had struck back, and the Gorth would never forget the price of underestimating their resolve.